Wir sind eine Bildner. Hello, I'm Gabriel. We are from Data Scientist, and Data Scientist is an educational institution for data sciences, DevOps, and AI. And we are very, very happy to welcome Tiankai Feng, a real bestseller author of 2 books regarding artificial intelligence and data governance. And the most important is the first book is Humanizing Data Strategy. The second book, bestseller as well, Humanizing Artificial Intelligence. So I'm very happy to listen to Tiankai Feng, and I will go back then. The stage is your, Tiankai.
Thank you very much. All right, then let's get started with the presentation. I'm very excited to talk to you all today about a buzzword that has been very prominent over the last years, which is data storytelling, right? And I think it's more storytelling, right? And not just data itself, but actually looking at how we have the right narratives to actually convince people about doing the right things. And with storytelling, it's an interesting one because storytelling has existed far longer than actually data storytelling, right? It's something that people in the past, even in ancient times, have used to communicate certain things. They made metaphors, analogies, they told stories to each other, to warn each other, to give each other some lessons, etc., etc. And when we now move to the age of information, it's actually different, right? And we kind of have to be more intentional about how we use storytelling in the right way, especially when we are looking at data that is not really written in human text anymore, but it's actually tables and graphs, etc., etc. So today I want to give you a little bit of a glimpse of how it all comes together, right? So why even do data storytelling? What are the other storytelling disciplines that we can learn from to actually improve our data storytelling? And finally, how we can actually bring it all together and how we finally actually tell good data stories maybe right away after you have joined the session. Of course, there's going to be a lot of Q&A afterwards as well. So this is going to be just an impulse. And I'm very excited to hear all of your questions about how maybe I can help you with your data storytelling questions. So let's get started first with a little bit of a self-introduction, right? So I'm Tiankai Feng. I currently work as a director for data and AI strategy at ThoughtWorks, which is a consultancy that focuses on data and tech solutions. I'm also engaged in the data community as the head of marketing of Dharma Germany, which is the German chapter of Dharma International, organization for data management professionals and data governance professionals as well. I've also turned my passion for the human side of data that I will talk about today into a TEDx talk 2 years ago, where I spoke about how human values need to drive AI actually. And as Gabriel already mentioned, I wrote 2 books about it too. I wrote Humanizing Data Strategy and Humanizing AI Strategy. And lastly, I'm also a musician that loves to use my musical talents also to make data and AI more fun and approachable. For example, with anthems like the Digital Analytics Anthem or Governance of Data, which both are rap songs about different disciplines we have in data. But more on the music maybe a little bit later. So why is data storytelling even important? Right? The idea is that data storytelling is the concept of building and compelling narrative based on complex data analytics that help tell your story and influence and inform a particular audience, right? So in the end, that already is really revealing to what it's all about, because you tell a story to a specific audience, and it's important for the audience to get something from it, right? Which means that storytelling needs to make data, first of all, contextual, right? So why in everything they should listen to is this one an important story to listen to for the audience, right? It needs to be convincing as well, right? There needs to be relatable facts and arguments and justifications of why it's actually changing people's minds and why they should listen to it and act differently than before. And that also leads to being compelling, right? Which means there needs to be an undeniable cause for action, right? What do we want people to care about? What do we want them to believe? And what do we want them to act upon to actually do the right things when it comes to data storytelling. And that means that when we think about the most impactful elements of storytelling, it's about the who, the what, and the how, right? So first of all, who means how do we touch the audience's heart emotionally, right? And it's specifically called emotionally because only addressing people in the rational sense is nice, right? And it kind of, for them to know, okay, it's the right thing to do is good. But it kind of feels forced, right? Because only by knowing it's the right thing to do, they're not necessarily excited about it. So by doing it emotionally, it means we would get people's emotions. They would strongly believe in it, but they also would be intrinsically motivated to do something about it, right? They really are eager to want to listen to something because they really care about it then, because they're emotionally involved. That is then followed by a what, right? Which is really a clear message that includes something new, right? So if you just tell messages that is all the same, right? And it's just something that repeats what people already know without having a certain amount of newness to it, right? Like either a new opinion about it or a new framing of something or even whole new results from research and development, then what actually is the point of why people should listen to it? So the what is really about the message that includes something new. And finally, it's also about the how, right? How we tell the story is also an unforgettable format and a structure, right? And the how can be multiple things, right? It can be the way how you design your PowerPoint slides. It can be how you use your voice to go up or down, or how you use loud noises or not so loud noises to tell a message. How you use different formats, like you use pictures or you use memes. You might also use videos. You also might use like animated slides versus static slides. All of that are choices we make that are conscious, right? To actually then provide an unforgettable format and structure. We need to leave an opinion and leave the impression that is something that is unforgettable. So by basically combining the who, what, and the how, we are making intentional choices about the communication. And it starts by understanding the audience, planning the message itself, and then building a memorable structure to then finally have the impact that we want with our storytelling. So, and that also means that the whole starting point of any story we want to tell is the audience itself. So the main question is, why should the audience even care, right? And this is kind of the thing, like depending on where you go and what stories you want to tell, if you don't first think about who the audience might be and you don't start to understand who it is and what they might care about, it can go really badly, right? You might use the wrong words, you might use the wrong level of detail, you might use things that is offending people because they feel not taken seriously because they already know about all of this. So why are they being treated like they don't know? It's really important to understand them first. And especially when you do public speaking, right? It might be that it's a very mixed audience too. So you need to kind of balance different ways of communicating and how you do it. But there's many ways of looking at how you understand an audience, right? For example, you could look at it from an organizational point of view, right? So if you're in the organization, what departments are they from, right? Are they all from the same department? Are they from different departments? What level of hierarchies is involved, right? That also has a cultural element, right? Are they rather all senior management? Are they all maybe more practitioners on the ground that are operationally involved? What kind of level of decision making do they have? And how much people leadership versus hands-on practicing are they actually doing? But also influence, right? Which is not the same as hierarchy, but you know how certain people in your colleagues, they have more influence than others. Some people are really great networkers, and even if they're not the most senior person in the organization, a lot of people might be listening to them and want to hear their point of views because they know things, and that is of level of influence, right? But how you actually then look at the right people and how you can identify where they're coming from, you might also realize which ones you need to pay more attention to in your audience than others, and who you need to actually convince even more than others as well. Then we have attitudinal factors, right, on the right side here, which means about their mindset and their attitude towards what is being talked about and what is being presented. And there you again have different elements you can look into. For example, you have promoters versus detractors, right? Those that are already for the thing that you're presenting versus those that are already against the thing you're presenting, right? And those have a big thing to count there on, because if you talk to promoters and they believe already in you doing, then you don't need to convince them anymore that's the right thing to do, right? You'd rather need to give them new things to care about to maybe build on that promotional attitude that they already have. With detractors, it might be different because they already are trying to see weaknesses or any points that support their point of view of why the thing being communicated is not the right thing, for example. So how is the way to then actually convince them? Because you cannot use the same communication as before to convince those people that's the right thing. Right? Then we have believers versus skeptics as an attitude too, right? So believers are people that generally always are believing in the next right thing. They love to think about new things, always assume positive intentions, then they thereby always want to look at what is possible. And then you also have skeptics, right? Which is more about the people that always first don't believe in something and they need a lot of proof points to actually understand what is important and why it's actually the right thing to do. And then you also have thinkers versus doers, right? So those people that love to philosophize about everything and think really, really deeply and discuss it, but they don't really want to do a lot about it, right? And you have doers. Those are the people that actually don't think a lot. They start doing things immediately, and they may or may not regret afterwards that they haven't thought about it a little bit longer. So they actually need to then go back and do it in a different way again, and everything in between. But knowing the attitude of people again is one way to then realize how you want to tell the story in the right way, right? Is it maybe more a cautionary tale? Is it maybe more of a best case scenario point of view? Is it maybe more an operational instructional aspect of it all? Or is it more a philosophical attitude to understand the why more? Either way, there's a lot of decisions we need to make to actually do it in the right way and to actually show the right a narrative to the right people with the right attitude. Then we also have, of course, informal elements, right? What is the family status, right? Are they single? Are they rather having already partners? Maybe do they have a family already, right? Either way, the typical example is that if you refer to something as parenthood, for example, as an example, then you might lose half of the audience if half of the audience is not even having any kids, just for example, right? So it's always important to also at least have a feeling for it. I know from a information sensitivity point of view, you cannot get it by just asking people. But if you know something already about them, then you can already think about what that means for the audience. Then, of course, you can about hobbies, where you know what people are into, right? For example, I worked for a sports company before, and I would know that I can use football analogies a lot because everyone in the organization could relate to it. So I could always use different sports disciplines to actually make a point. But also interests, right? Generally interests. Are they more interested in innovation? Are people more interested in stability, etc., etc.? If you have all of that, right, then it's also an important thing to know about and that you can incorporate into the narrative. And lastly, work motivation, right? Why do they go to work? What's in it for them to actually work? And since you want to impact their work day to day, does it actually then relate to what their motivations and work are? So are they more about career growth, right? Do they actually are very ambitious? Do they really want to go up the ladder, let's say, right? Or is it more about just learning and developing new things about what they want to know about? Maybe they just want to learn about new topics, they want to extend their horizons, and they want to learn about more. Or maybe they only want to keep the status quo, right? You know, those people that don't actually want everything to change. Best would be just to have the same rhythm with the same routine and do it in the same way every day. If people in the audience have a lot of those keep status quo mindset, then it's not really great, right? But it's also one of the ways how you need to then give them maybe a wake-up call about what's needed to change the status quo, or you need to address specifically the status quo in the right way so you can actually catch the people's attention and you give them a reason why they should care about it. And then it's about the clear message, right? So there should always be at least one clear message, right? And everything else should be supporting statements in the end, right? So what is actually the right one message at the very end that you want the audience to get the key takeaway from? And you can think about it, especially in professional context, that there are different message types that you should focus on, right? Or that you can focus on. For example, there's the informative type, which is more about you should know about this, right? It's more of a, it's important for you to now be aware of what's going on, right? And then later, when more details come, you are not surprised because you have heard about this before, for example. Then there's the persuasive type of a message, right? Which means I actually want you to do this and you should definitely do this, right? Listen to me because I want to convince you that this is the right thing to do, right? Then you have inspirational messages, right? Which is more about you should think about this, right? And you should think about this on your own, reflect on what you're doing, and maybe it gives you then the inspiration to do things a little bit differently. But it's up to you to actually find the right inspiration with it and do things in a way that you think is fit. And lastly, you have instructional as well, right? So you should do it this way, right? Where there's an agreement of what needs to be done already. But the next step is now, and that we all agree that this is something you need to be done. You should do it in this specific way, doing the steps A, B, C, and 1, 2, 3, right? And it's good to think about message hierarchies too, right? Where if you have too many competing messages, it's very hard to follow them, but also it's very hard to remember all of those because all of them then got communicated as must-have. But if everything is important, then nothing is really important, right? So prioritizing and kind of emphasizing the different messages, I think, is really key to make it work. So basically from there, we need to then also have examples, right? For example, so an example would be we need to invest into our e-commerce user experience, right? And what would be then the supporting messages would be, for example, bad consumer feedback, e-commerce sales declining, and bounce rates increasing, and adding to cart rates having decreased, right? All of those are data points that you have shown, but they all support the same message, right? That we need to invest into our e-commerce user experience, for example. And all of the other ones you can then tailor. So the key takeaway and the graphs and metrics that you show actually support exactly that message. Cool. So let's talk about other story structures that already exist, right? And I mentioned before that there's a lot of ways how we look into how storytelling in history has been done already. And we can actually go all the way back to the very original way of how theater has been done, which is Greek tragedies, right? Then we have the more best practice storytelling that we have with Pixar and Disney, right? Of how children movies, but are telling stories that resonate both with the old and the young, right? But even stand-up comedy has a very specific structure of how to tell stories, right? And to actually cause the laughter that people have, that they actually do when doing stand-up comedy. So let's look at Greek strategy first, right? Which is that it usually starts with an introduction, then it rises and leads to a climax, to something big that is happening where all of the things before have led to. Then there's either a return or a fall, right? It's either it goes back to better or it goes even worse to something finally worse. And then you have a catastrophe, which is, let's say, the final moment of what the key takeaway is and where it all ends, right? So you have basically that beginning, rising to the middle, and then falling to the end in there as well. With the Pixar stories, there's actually this publicly available so-called story spine as an element of communication, right? And the story spine, you can actually, if you have any movies that you watch from Pixar, like Toy Story, for example, or Inside Out, you will realize that a lot of these stories all follow the same structure, which always is that you have once upon a time, right? You start somewhere and position what it is, the who, what, and the where. Every day something happens, and every day something else would happen. And then you have the middle part, which is that something changes, right? Which is that one day something has changed that. And because of that, something happens. And because of that, something happens. And since everything has changed and transformed now, you come to the end part, which is so now every day something is there. And then the end, right? So you wrap it up and you basically show the transformation from beginning to end as well, and that the protagonists and the stories of the world has changed. And with stand-up comedy, it's also similar, right? You have the premise first, right? So you first let the audience get into the world and the setup that you are in, right? So I'm telling you now a joke about, for example, 3 people going to a bar is the premise, right? The setup, for example, then would be something that they do to actually go to the punchline, right? And then it's something, all of them order a certain drink, for example, would be the setup. Then you have the punchline, which is that they get all served the wrong drink because of their job titles or whatever, right? For example, could be the punchline. And then tags would be things that follow up on it, right? So something like where they would follow the tags and follow that same structure of, because of the different job titles, they get also wrong things in other places in their day-to-day. And again, that is another example of having beginning, middle, and end, right? Where you start actually with setting the stage and how everything plays. So what am I thinking about here? The context. Then you have the punchline, which is the climax again, and the middle part. And then you have the text, which is the end and what it all implies as well. But those different narrative structures have always worked in a certain way for all of the audiences, right? Of how actually it all fits together. And depending on what you're watching, either you're watching a Greek tragedy or you watch a Pixar movie or you watch a stand-up comedian, in a way, you know that if you have reacted to those, the stories are a big part of it. And as soon as you then, even if the jokes are always different, right? It's always a way to look at how it all fits together and how you can actually then build the structure in the right way. So with data storytelling, it's pretty similar, right? And the important part here is to look at how we can apply the same storytelling structure onto a data storytelling role. And with data storytelling, we can actually follow a 4-part narrative structure to actually, same as before, look into preparation, climax, and the key takeaways, right? So if you look here at the picture on the left side, it all starts with the setting at the hook, right? So you have the background and the current situation, right? Why actually is it happening the way it's happening right now? And why should people care? What are we talking about here? Then we start talking about the rising insights, right? So we talk about deeper insights into the problem or the opportunity that we want to talk about. It might be going a level deeper on the metrics, or it might be a root cause analysis that we show. It might be like a detective story, right? Where we actually talk about when we found out this, we were surprised why it went the way, and then we dig deeper and we found out this and this, right? And that finally leads to the aha moment, right? The major finding and the central insight, which, for example, could be in terms of data. We have been looking at how we do business all wrong, right? The data actually showed us that we were actually targeting our audiences in the wrong way when we did our marketing promotions, for example, right? And we should have actually used messages ABC instead of XYZ to those specific audiences, because this is much more resonating with them based on the proof that we have seen in the data points ABC. And from there, you then talk, of course, about what it practically means, right? So you have solution and next steps, right? And it's about the potential options that we can take and the recommendations that we give for people actually to do better and for us to change the problems for the better. And along all of that, the audience's knowledge would be enriched and the likelihoods to act would actually be also increased. And then this way, they were guided through that narrative structure to actually do something better about the data that they learn from. But this is like only one way of telling the story, right? With those elements that I just talked about. There are also other structures that we can consider if they fit to the narrative that you want to tell, for example, right? So, for example, we can also think about the reverse way of doing it. So we start with the key takeaways first, and then only explain how we got there, right? So, for example, if the reverse is, we are suggesting you to drop all of the marketing campaigns and create them from scratch again, and then you're shocking the whole audience, then you tell them, okay, but let me explain why, and you go back to what they claim, then they have the hook of knowing what the end is already, but they want to, of course, know why, how we got to the conclusion to be able to get convinced, for example, to do this, right? Or there's also the structure of being continuous, I call it, right? Which is a list of learnings and statements. Those typically also you see in the internet when it's about listicles, so-called, right? Where you have like 10 facts you didn't know about something, or here are 5 ways to do this and this, right? Where you give basically a limited number of things you want to tell, and you let the audience already know about what they can expect, right? By just saying those are 10 learnings, 5 recommendations, 3 key insights or something, right? They would know, okay, I'm going to follow this, and I'm part of the journey. I know where this is going, right? The good thing about it is that you don't have to then build that whole narrative structure as before, right? It can be a little bit more random regarding, because it's a list of how you actually bring it all together and how it's continuous. And lastly, then also you have the way of doing time travel, right? Time travel would be a way where we could actually work with scenarios saying, we are currently doing this now. This is where we are currently at from a metrics point of view. The past has been looking like this, and this is how it all led to the now. And from this, we are learning that for the future, we should do things a little bit differently than before, right? So you have that time travel element where you actually look into how you need to actually look into different time periods of now, past, and future to then tell the story about how it works in the best way. And of course, the visual element of storytelling is a really big thing, right? There are so many books and upskilling content and everything out there to look into how you can do visual storytelling in the right way with data, that I'm not going to bore you with all of the details this time, because I think you can all look it up on your own of what graphs fit to what kind of message in the best way, right? But what I want to tell you here is only just to be more intentional about it, right? That when you think about how you want to tell a story using graphs and different graphic elements about data points specifically, then it's really important also to choose the right one, because the eye always looks with you, right? And just as with human beings, it's always important to leave the right first impression. And it's the same way with graphs, right? That if the first impression is that it's chaotic and unclear, then it's very hard for people to actually then see it as something clear. Whereas if you just pay attention to what you want to talk and you reduce the graph to only the most necessary elements, and then it's much easier for people to grab what you want to tell. And of course, here you have, again, a lot of different elements here, for an example, from a Medium article of what are the right elements to do and how you can actually show it in the right way, to use different elements of storytelling visually to tell the right story as well. And to be actionable, right? Storytelling is not something that you just start doing in the right way perfectly every day, right? Storytelling is a little bit like a muscle that you actually need to activate and continuously train. Specifically when you talk about data storytelling, because this is something where we actually need to pay attention in our day-to-day to find the right ways and opportunities to do data storytelling and to then actually practice on it. And basically, it needs us to be conscious about it, right? So we need to learn about it, we need to practice it, and then we actually live it, right? So one way of doing it is that we upskill ourselves in data storytelling and visualization, and we actually give each other the right formats of how to learn from it, right? Like with books, online courses, and videos, right? Then in team meetings, we should maybe reserve time for each other to practice. So people have a safe space where they can practice their data storytelling and they actually get feedback from each other on how to improve it better. And we can also encourage peer-to-peer coaching, right? To pair up people, for example, to tell each other data stories and see how they can learn from it. And then we finally have to live it too, right? When we make creation of data stories part of the job description, and where we actually ask feedback from clients and stakeholders to then actually have the feedback loop of how actually storytelling works and if it's impactful or not. So key takeaways for today are: we need to make data stories contextual, convincing, and compelling, right? Start with understanding the audience as deeply as possible, and that should always be the starting point, right? Then we have to have a clear message type and make it a red thread throughout the story, right? I talked about how you need to have a persuasive story, or you might have more of an informational story, right? But be clear about that and make that then the key part of the story itself. Start with a known structure and then fill in the details, right? Again, I gave you different ways of looking into historical stories of how to actually make it best way, and how we can adapt those story structures to make our own. And finally, make storytelling part of your day-to-day and make it a habit as well, right? So let's not just think that we know how it works, but we need to actually practice it and get feedback on the way to actually know that it's doing the right things and that our stories that we tell are impactful. All right. And before we then go into Q&A now, I want to show you another way of storytelling that I'm very happy to use, which is using the language of music, right? And for example, now what I want to show you is how I'm telling a story about how AI might impact our love life in the future. It's a song called You and I and AI. And I want to see if you maybe already realize a little bit what the story of it all is, and maybe how much of a narrative element I used in the story. Songs always have a specific structure, right? Where you have verses and you have choruses that are repeating anyway. But even besides that, it's a way to structure the story you want to tell, and may it inspire you to also find your creative ways of telling stories and how you can actually make topics that might seem dry or complicated more fun and applicable. So let's play the music video now.
Sitting in the restaurant, my hands are getting sweaty. Forgot how to small talk, my mind's like mom's spaghetti. So I slip in one earbud, pretend to check the time, while AI whispers poetry that I can claim as mine. Ask which movies she likes, the bot suggests with care. Now I am a film expert with insights everywhere. She thinks I'm so engaging, laughs at my witty quips. Thank God for AI autocomplete feeding me these scripts. Life is so much better with algorithmic love. No more awkward pauses. We're compatible because the data says we're perfect. The metrics, they don't lie. Everything's amazing with you and I and AI. You and I and AI. Meeting with her parents, I walk in way too bold. Nice to meet you, sir. Your wife looks really old. Panic mode activated. Excuse myself real quick. To the bathroom with my phone, not gonna search something slick. Turns out that loves model trains and mom's into orchid care. Now I'm an expert on rare species anywhere. They think I'm so delightful, he's a keeper mother size, while I am reading search results through my side eye. Life is so much better with algorithmic love. No more awkward pauses. We're compatible because the data says we're perfect. The metrics, they don't lie. Everything's amazing with you and I and AI. You and I and AI. Standing at the altar, my vows are quite sublime. My AI helper wrote them, even made them rhyme. The wedding planner's AI, the flowers picked by code. Our first dance was choreographed in viral video mode. But when I say I do, she stops and starts to cry. I have a confession, I've been living a lie. Every text, every joke, every sweet thing I say has been generated by my trusted AI all the way. I laugh and pull her closer. Darling, please don't feel so blue. Every single thing I've said was artificial too. We kiss beneath the LED screen, our match made in AI heaven. Two souls united by the code, our love score 10 out of 7. Life is so much better with algorithmic love. No more awkward pauses. We're compatible because the data says we're perfect. The metrics, they don't lie. Everything's amazing with you and I and AI. You and I and AI.
All right. And that's it. Thank you very much for your time. Let's do some questions. You're on mute, Gabriel.
Thank you very much, Tiankai, for this great ending. Everything's amazing with you and I and AI. Makes one laugh and makes one think in the same time. Beautiful, this humanizing AI in action. Really, that was brought really some things forward. As I am moderating, I have the right of the first question, and I would love to ask you. Bringing this beautiful song, which are you already? Do you count already the likes and the shares on YouTube or anywhere?
Yeah, I could probably. I don't look at it too much, but yeah, I'm
You
not
should.
counting on it to be commercially successful or something.
But if it would be, it would the chances are higher to get the people think about
Yeah, that's true.
that.
That's true.
I feel.
That's a very good point.
Right. And anyway, my question would be, how far are we from the picture of Terminator? How far are we away from the Terminator? I talk
Yeah,
about the
that's already.
first.
Yeah, I mean, so I would break it down into hardware and software, right, of the Terminators, because we all know, right, Terminators are robots that are acting human-like, but actually have a very clear goal of either killing or saving human beings, right? With the software part, I think, of course, there have been a lot of progress now over recent years, especially now chatbots and LLMs can talk like human beings, right? And with agents, you can actually give them clear purpose. And we all know that also now AIs have their own self-preservation mode kind of already embedded. So in a way, that is something that's clearly going in the direction that could be a sign of intelligence of how the software of Terminators could soon potentially be real. With the hardware part, I'm a little bit more or less optimistic because simply said, the robots that we see nowadays, right? I mean, machines are really good, but none of them are acting as flexible and stable as human beings yet. Especially thinking about jumping, running, shooting guns, saving people, getting people out of buildings. All of them being done by one robot is not possible yet. So yeah, that might be a different story. But then again, there's a lot of research out there that's making innovation with those robots too. So who knows how long it will take until that is getting there.
Thank you for this
Sure.
answer. And do we have already some questions? Do we? I guess if we have, we can put them in and I go away from the stage. Look.
Yeah. I'm just trying to compare with the version of future. That was about my song, I guess, right? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, the song that I just shown you, of course, is a bit more cynical and sarcastic about all of this, right? It's not meant to be an actual prediction of how the future would look like. But I was just basically thinking in my head how with the AI support they do, and especially with all of the news that we are outsourcing our critical thinking to AI, how it could look like that even if we delegate and outsource our dating life and our love lives, right? And you could take it really to a very weird future in this way. But of course, I don't think we should do this way, right? Like, human connection is still something very special and very meaningful. And I don't think we should let AI actually guide us on how to do that, because that is still the one part that makes us different from machines, that we have feelings, we have a right gut feeling, right? We know how emotions work, and we have actual love for the people around us. So that was more of a, I guess, a jokey way of addressing that. Any other questions? Any questions? Doesn't even have to be only about data storytelling or the song, right? So, thanks. Glad you liked it.
So what do you say actually about like predictions of the future? Okay, your beautiful song. I don't see it so sarcastic actually, because many people are inclined to believe what is going on, and that they can
Hmm.
have it structured by AI and everything. And people who are maybe more shy and more into algorithms and everything could really use it. Nowadays, there are even psychotherapists on ChatGPT. I
Yeah.
mean, psychotherapy. What do you say to that? I mean, isn't that really dangerous? Actually, people say that it's very good. I heard.
Yeah.
What do you say?
So, I mean, I think there are multiple angles to this, right? On the one hand side, it's if you want to have a sparring partner to be more
Mhm.
clear about your thoughts, then ChatGPT can work as a great mirror, for example, right? Where you're like, those are all my thoughts that come together. How does it reflect about me, right? And based on everything you know about how the world works, um, how is that putting me in the context of other human beings, right? And that is maybe a valid point to make, right? It's more of a description and more of an observation that you ask an AI bot to do, right? With psychotherapy, it's a little bit more tricky, simply because um, with ChatGPT, I know what happens a lot is it kind of confirms your point of views, right? And kind of goes into your tendencies. So it gives you the illusion that it understands you, right? So if you would tell um, ChatGPT, I'm very sad today because of this and this happened, the normal reaction without any kind of prompting is, oh, I completely understand you. If I were you, I would feel that way too, blah, 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 right? And that could be good, right? Because you feel that empathy in quotation marks of a machine, right? But on the other hand, a psychotherapist normally is not supposed to just confirm your thoughts. They're supposed to challenge you and let you frame thoughts in your head in a different way. And that's something that ChatGPT is not doing on its own, right? And why would it even know how to do it without the human touch of it all, right? So I think there's really a fine line to be taken where do we actually use it as a tool and helper for ourselves as an assistant, or are we actually asking a machine to guide us how to be better human beings? Because how could that be, right? How can we ask a machine to be better human beings if we are the human being in this pairing? So it's very, I think, tricky to find the right balance there, but we need to be conscious about what choices we make on how much we actually rely on AI versus not.
Indeed, I would very much be in. Don't make us humans so small, right?
Yeah.
So we are bigger than we are telling ourselves sometimes, being flooded with the new AI news and everything. So just I wanted
Yeah.
to say that, and now I leave you to this question.
Great. So the question is, about you talked about self-preservation mode for LLMs. Have you seen heard of chatbots delivery trying to achieve the goals? Yes, I actually have. I have not done it myself, but Anthropic, I mean the company behind Claude, right? They had released an article about their own research and development, and they basically were doing an experiment where they told LLMs that um, they would need to save their own existence because there's some like they made a scenario of cost cutting and that they will need to interact with different decision makers. And what happened was because it was trying to self-preserve, it actually started blackmailing decision makers with emails and started lying a little bit even just to get people to recognize the importance of those LLMs existing. It's a very interesting one. I think you can look it up yourself. We're just looking at LLM self-preservation and Anthropic. But yeah, I think that was also a very interesting research to look into, and I believe that if we would do some more research on it, which probably already happens, we can find out more about that. Right? It's all about what are the right goals and what are the right values that we are trying to teach LLMs, right? And since human self-preservation is one of the strongest values we have, it can be misinterpreted by an LLM into self-preserving, no matter the cost, right? Even if it's lying or blackmailing, and that can be a very dangerous precedent about it.
For this question, and I would like to read the next question.
Yeah.
If there's there is. Do you have any thoughts on how we could measure positive intent and effectiveness for the future when developing leveraging new technologies? Let's go.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think so. When we develop new technologies, we normally think of positive intention directly, right? So, for example, with AI, right, a lot of it was driven always by imitating human intelligence, but doing specific things maybe even a little bit faster than human beings could do it, right? And that would mean that ideally the positive intent is that we can like tedious task of human beings less tedious and let machines help human beings to do that, right? But with anything that is framed as positive, there's always a high likelihood that it's negative for someone else, right? And we see the effects now immediately, which is that if we now say some people don't like tedious tasks and it can finally be supported by AI, those people that do actually enjoy tedious tasks are now threatened in their jobs because this is all they were doing in their day to day. And now suddenly they might be replaced by AI. And that's the general narrative out of it as well. So no matter how we develop or leverage new technologies, the thing is, it's always going to have pros and cons because in the end, it's about how we're using it, right? What we're using it for. In the end, technology is still a tool, right? And it's about the human beings that have good or bad intentions behind it, right? So you can always use something that is meant for the good for something bad, and you might be even able to use something that was developed for something bad to be used for the good, right? It's all about how we as human beings frame it and use it in the right way. So measuring it in the end comes down to behavior as well and mindset. So however we want to measure the mindset of people, it might be through surveys, it might be through discussions, it might be through just talking to them and just seeing their behavior about engaging in positive versus negative aspects. This is, I think, what really matters, right? And as you say it, it's also about trade-offs, maybe even, right? So, for example, it might make us faster in certain things, but what is the cost on the environment, right? So we all know that by running prompts, we are costing a lot more energy than by doing it in simpler ways. So is it really worth it? So even the most positive intent might have a negative trade-off, and we need to be really intentional and conscious about that it happens. So it's more about the trade-off and making conscious choices, and thereby I think this is really the key here.
For that, it's so good to have an expert answering.
I think your microphone is far away
again. Oh
no, yeah.
Yeah, the humankind, right? So it's so nice to have an expert answering those questions. Brings you to think. Another question, which I will read.
Hola, good to see you. Yeah.
Very good. So read the question of Ola. Please. Stories are so cool, so universal to our brains. Sure thing. But the disturbing trend of skimming content, like not even going beyond the subject or a headline, did you experience such a cringy moment yourself that you made you doubt whether longer content or an actual story that has a certain intellectual challenge built within is still a thing? And is it a thing to stay?
Yes. Oh, it's a great question. So I think generally short and very quick content has a valid reason to exist as the same as long form content, right? And let me maybe take an example, not just from text, right, and written stories, but even the example I would say would be between TikTok videos and long form YouTube videos, right? Where TikToks, of course, are usually between maybe maximum 1 to 3 minutes long, probably most of them even shorter, right? And your brain is basically used to just scroll through it, and you just kind of just look at like very short ones, and you let it bombard you. But when you actually look at a longer video and you're really engaged with it, right, then you actually want to really resonate with it much longer, and you do it. I think the difference really is what your brain wants as an intellectual stimulation, right? Sometimes just being kind of exposed to a lot of impulses is one way of looking at it, and then you might do it passively for a certain reason, just to get like a lot of new impulses. But sometimes you want to do really something deep and go really deeper, and you have the time to really engage with something. If I would take another example, for me would be if I watch like a 20-minute comedy series, I'm maybe not as engaged as I would watch like a 2-hour movie where I like really see one full story end to end, and I resonate much deeper with the characters that are in there, right? And I think as human beings, we need both, right? I don't think we can survive on only short content, or we don't have the mental capacity to only look at long form content every day. We kind of need both to exist, but we just need to be consciously aware of what we use for different things, right? Where it might be for shorter content that it just gives you impulses, right? Very on the surface. But for longer content, you just kind of want to actually go deeper and make critical thinking more present as well. I hope that answers the question.
Good. So one more question we have, which I will read right now. Frederick, Stephen
Hi, Frederick.
Few has long emphasized the importance of simple, clear visualizations and dashboards as a support for decision making. How do you view the next step, where we move beyond static dashboards towards using AI to automatically identify patterns, anomalies, and insights in the data? What opportunities and risks do you see in letting AI take a more active role in analysis compared to when the user interprets the visualization themselves?
Yeah, it's a great question, and good to see you again, Frederick. I mean, generally, I think what you're talking about is the trend to go towards more what we call conversational BI, right? So moving from the place where BI was shown more in dashboards and people have to click on it and filter it and look at the metrics, right? To now finally being maybe able to just ask an LLM about how the metrics are doing and get a summary immediately, right? And that also implies that the AI has already done the analysis and the key takeaway and the summarization of it all. So it just kind of already gives you the results at the very end. I think what it comes down to is because technically it's going to be more and more possible. I know it's not easy because you need to still build the right context around metrics and you need to actually teach it how to do the right analysis. But for specific, simpler and more common analysis patterns, I think AI will be able to do that. The question is how we as human beings still want to consume things, though, right? So do we still want to get everything only by a chatbot? And do we really every day just want to talk to a chatbot about the metrics? Or do we actually like to be visual learners and visual informants to see at a glance all of the metrics and then make decisions more intuitively based on it, right? That is something where the question really comes down to, is it technically possible versus as human beings do actually want it to be that way? And is one thing actually going to replace the other thing? My hunch is that both will coexist, right? I think we will still have dashboards and a lot of great looking graphs and key takeaway being generated by human beings, but they might be all supported in many ways by AI. And if AI is the preferred way of interacting with data, that might be another way to do it. But both will exist in their own purpose and depending on what the preference of the users in the end are. With AI taking a more active role now in the analysis compared to when the user and personalization themselves, there's another very interesting story there because in big part of doing this analysis is the root cause analysis, right? And not every time is the root cause analysis the same path, right? It's not like you always look exactly into the same metrics of why certain KPI goes up or down. Sometimes it's a whole new hunch that requires a new point of view on it, like a new data set or a new kind of framing of it all that human beings have done with critical thinking so far. So the question is, can we as human beings just assume that an AI on their own will know when they need to apply a new critical thinking versus apply an old pattern? Probably not, from what I'm thinking. So this is why human beings will always still need to be in driver's seat, because when they finally realize it actually requires a new take on it and a new impulse of looking at things a little bit differently, that's a human decision. And then we may or may not teach AI to do that, but it starts as a human decision first and a human analysis. So we then actually do it. So actually, my belief is that AI, that human beings will always need to be in the driver's seat. but it will just be able to delegate a few more things to AI for automated things, but it will never leave it as a driver, right? It will always have to be there just to control and ensure that everything goes well.
Ending statement of yours. You're still invited all around there to post questions. I would just say thank you to you. Thank you, the filters, to you for your insightful presentation. And which you said, the human being should be still in the front seat to direct where we go and what decisions we make, brings me to us, data scientists. We are a training institution which helps people to get the skills to build up artificial intelligence, data analysis. We give different seminars and trainings towards all that. We would love to have you with us. datascientist.com/de is the way to go. We would love to meet you there. We will have often such insightful webinars. I hope with Tiankai Feng as well. And I say thank you to Tiankai for your really great webinar where we could have learned very much. Well, I'm sure everybody. And I guess I will leave you then and book a meeting with us, and you can have seminars and stuff. And I wish you all a great day. If you have a question, now is the moment. I wish you a wonderful day. Thank you, Tiankai. Thank you, everybody, to listen to us. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for your time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.